Hello, and welcome to another installment of our question and answer panel brought to you by the Harm Reduction Task Force. My name is Carrie Leonard. I'm the Director of Learning, and today we will be talking about using a harm reduction lens when we're working with individuals that have a history of incarceration. We have very special guests today. I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves. Chris, why don't you start?
Hi, my name is Krystin, and I'm a clinical supervisor for the ODR program.
I'm Steve Vital. I'm a clinical case manager with ODR on the West Side.
Charles Cofield, substance abuse case manager for the FSP homeless downtown.
All right, so let's dive into our questions. Our first question is, what are some considerations to take into account when working with individuals with a history of incarceration? And then sort of the follow-up to that is, how do you build rapport? So Charles, you want to kick that question off?
So where would I begin? First of all, working with individuals coming out of prison, I would think, first of all, we will have to identify with culture. Having spent a lot of years in prison myself. So when I mean culture, I mean when you're in prison, there's a culture thing and there's a bond with racists. And so coming out in the prison system, you have this clique, who you run with and who you don't run with. And there's a lot of racism involved. And normally the people that are involved, they're not racist, but because of where we're at, you have to be who you are. And most of the time when you get out, that's really not who you are. But for the ones that are, that pattern kind of sticks with them when they get out. So it would be to identify with culture, what the person has done, what some of their interests are. In order to build that rapport, you need to be able to have the client open up about what's really going on with him, childhood, family life, what led him to this type of lifestyle. Usually it's the neighborhood, usually it's peer pressure. If you're anything like me, you just wanted to be a gangster. So you would have to look at all those different aspects and to see if that particular individual is coming out into society with the same mentality. Some don't, but most do. And the stigma of you can't get no job because you're a felon, you ain't no good, this, that, and the other, and not really identifying and introducing that individual to programs and services that don't care nothing about how long you've been in prison or what you've done. You did your time and we're here to help you. Because them type of individuals such as myself coming out, you don't know these things and you look at yourself in the world like everybody is against you. So that would be the first thing, to provide some services that will show the individual that I can get you back on your feet if that's what you want to do. So that would be the biggest thing. And that would be also a part of building a bond and a rapport with that individual.
Can you share some of the techniques that you use to, start building rapport and building that trust with people?
Yeah, one of the things I do is I listen. Normally, clients will tell you exactly how to help them if you listen, and not already come in with your own diagnosis or your own preconceived notion of who this person is and what this person needs. So I don't do that. I just be real. I talk to them and I listen and I get them to open up. And sometimes I share some of my experiences just to, crack the egg, to let them know, like, look, you're not alone. For the individual that has not lived the lifestyle and that's not able to crack the egg in that manner, I would suggest that you listen and that you be different than what they're accustomed to. Because trust me, they done had 9,000 providers that did nothing in their minds, right? And so you have to have a different approach. It's very important. And listening is the best approach because they'll tell you exactly what they need, how they feel. And from that, you can change your approach or how you deal with the particular individual. But you just got to have a listening ear And I have to put aside my differences, what I think, what I don't think, how I feel, what I feel. I have to leave all that in the car when I get out and go talk to this client. So that's one of the best things.
Thank you, Charles.
Mhm.
The next question is for you, Chris. So how do you coordinate care and partner with systems that do not practice under a harm reduction lens, for example, like court systems?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to piggyback a little bit off what Charles said, because they're coming out, our clients are coming out into a world where they don't trust anyone. We're a part of law enforcement, they may think. So it's important to emphasize what our role is and describe what's confidential and what's reportable, and how we work within the court system so they know what will be reported, how we could help them. Because my thought is, you know, if they don't come, like if law enforcement doesn't come from a harm reduction approach, it creates dishonesty. And like Charles said, we want the client to be honest, and they will be if they feel comfortable and if they can trust you, but they've had so many providers that maybe has failed them in the past. So they often say things like, well, what are you gonna do that's different? How are you gonna help me? So definitely coming from a place of authenticity and building that trust, and coming from the harm reduction approach would be meeting them where they're at, you know, like we may not be asking you for total sobriety or total compliance, but there is going to be things that you do need to comply with. But as long as the client stays engaged, we will work with them. The courts will work with them. The housing will work with them. But not everybody is harm reduction trained. Law enforcement, the probation officers, they don't always come from that same approach. So as we have to build rapport with our clients, we have to build rapport with housing, with probation, with the judge, and be somewhat of an advocate for the client as well. If the client continues to engage with us, we could help communicate and work with the client, work with housing. The goal would be to not lose their housing. The goal would be to have the housing staff continue to want to work with the client if they relapse or leave for the weekend or whatever risks they're putting themselves in. Also with the judge, we can communicate with the judge how they are progressing. Maybe they are not perfectly running their program, but recognizing the small successes, even if it's not 100% what everybody wants to see. And sobriety is not a requirement for the ODR program. It is a goal that they could make, but if they are risking their housing or getting rearrested and things like that, or their level of functioning, their mental health is getting impacted, treatment can be court ordered or recommended for the client. But of course, if they AWOL, or it's going to be more difficult to work with them, and they will get disenrolled, but they could also get re-enrolled if they get recommended back to our program. But I would say it's a work in progress as far as getting all the systems on board and continuous training and education and working together as a team. You know, again, emphasizing the progresses that they do make, and it may not be what everyone expects or wants initially.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it sounds like doing a lot of advocacy and
Yes.
highlighting their strengths and success, despite, you know, they may not be at the ultimate goal that other systems are hoping that they're at, but really, you know, being the advocate to highlight the progress and also role modeling the lens that we're using to work with them.
Exactly.
Great.
But they are given multiple chances, I will say. Like it seems like we exhaust a lot of resources as well. I mean, we will communicate and work with them as much as it takes, and the whatever it takes lens to work with the client. And we will give them multiple chances. The courts will give them multiple chances. So that is something that is different than some programs where they might kick you out immediately if you relapse or something like that, but that's not always the case here.
Okay, Steve, this next question is for you. How do you apply harm reduction throughout your work with clients who have a history of incarceration?
So I think without repeating everything that Charles and Krystin just said, one of the things that I really try to identify is what is the greatest harm to my client. So working with clients that have gone through incarceration, experienced homelessness, and substance use, those are usually the three factors that we find intersecting in at least in ODR in my caseload. It's trying to figure out which is really the scariest to them first. Like I definitely have clients who, you know, we've presented every part of the program, and being reincarcerated is possibly not a motivation for them, right? Risking housing, they might not be there where they're ready to say, well, I'd rather be housed than quit using substances. And so I think it's like what's been said before, we have to meet them where we're at and really work to try to figure out what their goals are. Just as Krystin said, after identifying that, then trying to figure out with all the parties at hand, like what can we do to advocate on their behalf? So if I have a client at an interim housing site and they're threatening to discharge them because of substance use and behaviors, you know, we would be trying to push back on that as much as we could. We would be asking, what are the behaviors that are putting the client or other people at risk at the housing that would deem them needing to be discharged? You know, once we try to advocate as much as we can to get those parties more on board with us, which I think is a lot of what we do. I think that harm reduction is coming more from the bottom up rather than the top down, right? Harm reduction is not like completely accepted by the judicial system, these interim sites, the incarceral system for sure. It doesn't seem to be, you know, people are still being charged and put in jail for drug offenses widely. So once we do that, it's then going to the client and really expressing to them what the consequences of the behaviors with the substance use may be. And I try to even there stay away from the substance use, but talking about how could we reduce those behaviors. If they're going to be using, is there any way we could come to some place where they're using less or minimizing whatever behaviors are threatening to the interim site or themselves. So again, like theirs reducing harm for themselves or to themselves based on the homelessness or the housing. I think for my own assumptions, being reincarcerated would be extremely harmful to our clients. But again, sometimes the client may not see that as a threat. And as we are giving court reports and going through the system, they may have difficulty still going to treatment if that's what's mandated by the judge. And again, first step is always advocating with the court that we're still engaging. We're still trying to figure this out and minimizing whatever behaviors the client may be doing. Another thing that I think is important, strangely, is budgeting. So if they're using, what are their means of accessing the drugs? What is their income right now? And having real and open conversations about that with them. Desperation leads to other criminal offenses that are reoffendable. So, and increased recidivism. So I think it's important to have those conversations about, okay, if we're using substances, how are we making sure that's within a realistic budget that we have so that we're not creating situations where we need to borrow money from dangerous people, possibly steal or whatever other behaviors. So yeah, I know that's a large spectrum, but I think they're all considerations. There is a lot of different intersecting harm to try to take them account. And I love what Charles said, like listening to the client. If someone's not going to hear that they need to, you know, the mandated treatment, if they're not going to be, if they're not there yet, how can we interact with the client to make sure they're still safe, keep them in the best position as possible? And how can we advocate with the other parties to make sure that they're still working with us, understanding that we might have a little bit different approach to them, but we're still working towards the same goal. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Steve. Does anyone else have anything to add before we move on?
Well, I was thinking that again, if that were the case and they were engaging in extreme use where they're endangering themselves and others, we would assess them for if they needed hospitalization or a referral for FSP, mental health counseling. There's all kinds of different resources we can offer and provide for them to help them maintain their housing or some sort of stability. So we want to try and avoid the punitive measures, basically, and encourage, you know, change talk, motivational interviewing, like everyone else said, meeting the client where they're at, listening. So hopefully we can move them towards the ultimate goal that they are wanting to achieve.
Great, and the final question is how, and this is for everybody, anyone can answer, how do you manage your own expectations of the clients?
That's interesting. So for me, the goal and the motto has always been to the client and not for the client. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. Clients write their own treatment plan. I don't actually have an expectation. My expectation is only to myself, and that I provide the best services that I can provide for the client no matter what. I believe in showing up and being visible, regardless of how he acts. One thing he's gonna know, whether he like me or don't, he's showing up. This dude is gonna come by, you know, and so my expectations is only about doing my job, not for the client. Because his expectations must always be greater than my expectations for himself. And so that's how I deal with it. And like you all have said, everybody comes from different places and different things that has transpired in their life. It's important to find that inner person. I always talk to clients on a personal level, like, come on, man, this ain't what you was dreaming about doing. When you was laying down as a child asleep, you wasn't dreaming about going to penitentiary 5 times. You didn't dream of being downtown LA smoking crack. That wasn't your dream. So let's talk about some of those aspirations that you had. And maybe we can't meet all of them now, but let's try to look at some of them. Like, because you got to understand, people been doing what they've been doing for years, right? And it's just normal. Losing a housing match, they don't care. They've never had nowhere to live. That's, you know, going back to prison. That's what I do. That's all I know. And so it's about being able to introduce a new concept and a new way of living. I got clients that get apartments, but I still meet them at their tent. And people be like, I can't believe he got an apartment, but we're meeting at his tent. Why you can't believe it? Because you don't understand that the transition from homelessness to housing, sometimes it's very difficult for individuals. You know, some people get an apartment and their whole life change. Some people get an apartment and nothing changes. And so that's where the real work comes in. That the expectation is always on the client. Always put the ball in his court. Always allow him to make his own decisions, to feel like he's in control, even though I know sometimes he's not. Right? But it's important to build that rapport and that trust, and that I'm not an authority figure, right? I'm here to help. I'm here to assist. I'm not here to demand and none of that stuff, man. And talk down on you and discredit how you feel and what you've been through. You know, I think that's real important.
Charles, that was so well said.
Yeah.
I mean, that really
Definitely.
that just epitomizes being ultimately person-centered, right? Having the power back with them. And I love how you talked about, like, that's not what you dreamed of, right? So connecting with people, like, what are your dreams, right? But yeah, that was so perfectly stated. Thank you for that, Charles.
Definitely.
I think sometimes the core of this, the way that we work with people, we can get lost and we get caught up in the services and the paperwork and the goal planning and sort of the human component can get lost in human services. And Charles, you just put it right back in there. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the part where, where they came from and where they want to go, or where we want them to go, may not look right, but how they get there, they can't be expected to go from A to B in a second. It takes time, building the skills, building the empowering them to, make their own choices. And they may not be exactly, ready for housing to live on their own. They may need another form of housing in that moment to get them to the next step. But it's a process.
I was going to add, the empowerment piece and truly being able to allow them to decide and being as clear as possible of what some of the trajectory or options might look like moving forward, right? So like part of the way I manage my own expectations is by looking at the whole situation and explaining them exactly what the future might look like, right? If there's behavior or an issue, this is what the court might say. This is what might delay housing. This is what might interfere with this. And again, it's not to make sure I am not the authoritative figure telling them you need to do this in order to get this. This is what the case may be, and it's for you to decide how you want to go forward. Again, just like Charles was saying, the empowerment piece, allowing them to make that option for themselves is what I think is just crucial in managing my own expectations as well, because I don't want to be the one that has to be responsible for my client being housed or maintaining housing or anything like that. They are their own person, and that's part of empowerment, so.
All right, so I have this bonus question. Y'all did really good about, answering the managing expectations. But the truth is, when we're working with folks, we build connections, we build relationships, and ultimately we see people making decisions that at times could be really hard for us to sit back and watch. So real talk, how do you manage your disappointment? I know there's those moments where you're like, oh, yeah, I wish I wouldn't have made that decision. But again, it's their choice, their life. So how do you manage your disappointments? Mm-hmm. Sorry, I threw you a curveball there.
I think, again, it's really that's doing some of your own work on understanding what's making you disappointed, right? Like in our work, I know I'm cursed with all the stupid perfectionist, blah, blah, blah. When I see 12 unhoused people on my caseload, I want to house them all as fast as possible. And it's almost like an endeavor and a challenge for me. And the reality is that's selfish and more self-centered than anything else. And so in terms of trying to it's getting yourself outside of disappointment. I can be sad for this person. I can be existentially have issues with the way the world is because this is the option this person was given, but I can't be disappointed in the choice they made, right? There's been so many things that led up to that client deciding that action. Like Charles said, once someone has been incarcerated 5 times, who knows what happened to them to get them to that point in their life. But it was probably a lot of unfair things that I hope we can talk more about someday. But, I think to get outside of ourselves and have compassion, empathy, and understanding is the number one thing. Like, I never want to feel disappointed in a client because they deserve the respect and the understanding and dare I say love, you know, from just the human standpoint, like that anyone else would. There's a lot of things that ended up having them make that decision, and I'll stand by them. Like, I love what you said, Charles. One thing they're going to get is this dude's going to come by, he's going to show up, you know, and that's no matter what the decision is, it's not going to be met with disappointment. Hopefully it'll be understanding. And if I am feeling disappointed, I need to go talk to my supervisor about that before I go talk to my client, because it's not fair to put that on them.
Well said. Thank you, Steve. Very insightful as well.
You know.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, cool.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I think we invest a lot too. And once we build that rapport, like, we really truly care about what happens to people, and we want to see the best thing in them and the best things happen for them. And when that doesn't happen, it can feel like maybe we have failed them, you know, like, oh my God, I did not do enough for them. How have I failed? Or I really am scared for this person. I want to see the best for them. And it could be an ongoing struggle to be in acceptance and managing, you know, our feelings about it and the risks that they put themselves in, or the system in itself. You know, sometimes I feel like the system fails people, and I get really frustrated with that. And it's a constant having to show up no matter what, and be there for them, and know that we are doing the best that we can. They're doing the best they can, and we're going to all try and move forward.
So I don't know if, you know, we always say that it's to the client and not for the client. But at the end of the day, when you worked with an individual for a long time, and you did a lot of work with this client and things happen, I never want to forget the human aspect of this process. I'm gonna feel something. I don't know if it's disappointment. I don't know if I'm gonna go home and talk about it with my homeboy. I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to take it home. I don't want to watch Netflix and be thinking about, oh, I failed this client. But there's ways to deal with these things. And one of the first aspects was I worked with a client diligently, and she died out there. I just couldn't get her to do nothing different with her life. I just couldn't, you know, it just didn't happen. I would get on a path and she would fall back off. And when she died, I had to process that. So I'm saying all that to say that there are going to be some times, because we are human. You need to find your way to process. I have a great supervisor. I got a great team. And then I got people in my personal life. So you have to learn to process what you go through with clients. Because it would be a lie for me to say, if I work with a client for 2 years and things just went all bad, that I don't feel nothing. I'm just not made up that way. I'm not a gangster no more. So I just don't feel that way no more. So I have to process my motives, my actions, and what I'm doing at all times. Because it is easy to get caught up, especially when you love this type of work, man. When you can't wait to get up in the morning and go to work, because you don't know what you might expect with the type of population that we deal with. It's important to be able to process and have someone you can go to or do something to process. And this is why self-care is so important. Mm-hmm. But I also understand at the end of the day, man, that it's totally up to the client. And if I know I've presented all of the services and everything that I could possibly do, and the client still made the decision, I gotta be okay with that. I don't have to like it, but I gotta be okay with it. And that's just it.
Mm-hmm. We're big on self-care and mindfulness and doing what we got to do to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, burnout is a big factor in this field. So we do want to remain human and compassionate, like everyone is saying.
So that concludes all the questions, but I just would like to sort of wrap this up with any last sort of final thoughts or messages to staff watching this. When working with clients that have a history of incarceration, when you're coming from a harm reduction lens, any sort of last words of guidance or tips or things to be mindful of that you want to put out there and share?
I want to say that because I did a panel last year with a group of therapists that work with TPC. I want to share that. I always share that just because I come from, I could have been a client with the lifestyle I had, right? But I want to share that just because I come from incarceration, drugs, and gang banging and all that, don't think that because you don't come from that lifestyle, you can't assist the client. Because in my own personal life, it was someone that done none of that helped save me. And so that's what's important, because that individual told me, no, I don't know nothing about prison. I don't know nothing about drugs. I don't know nothing about gangs. I was like, so what you gonna do for me? He was like, I'm gonna show you how to pay bills. Have you ever done that? I was like, wow. I'm gonna show you how to, stay on a job consecutively. I was like, wow. So don't ever think because you don't come from the lifestyle or the background, you can't be a help. And the way you touch that is by listening to the client. You can build a rapport regardless of where you come from or what you've been through. That's totally different than the client, man. So don't ever think that, because you don't identify or you've never been homeless. It doesn't matter, man. It's your approach and it's your willingness and it's your care for this population and your willingness to help, man. That's all that really matters.
Perfect. Thank you, Charles.
On a separate kind of educational note, I was thinking about overdose prevention, and as far as the clients coming out of jail and maybe having this history of drug use and going back into the community, they may feel that they want to use because that's what they were accustomed to, or that is their pattern. And I think it's important just from an educational point of view to have Narcan do work on overdose prevention, because that would be the most vulnerable time for the client because of their tolerance level and them not having, they might be using the same amount that they used before. So it's really important to be aware of those kinds of things. And we've had several case managers go into the homes or housing and the clients look as though they have overdosed. So we try and carry Narcan in order to administer just in case those kinds of situations happen, since we're going into their homes and out in the field. And that's always something to keep in mind. And I hope that law enforcement also can come from that point of view and administer Narcan or give the appropriate referrals rather than detainment when they're running across these situations with clients.
Chris, I think you brought up an excellent point. And some of the feedback from staff is, we struggle with how to broach this topic with clients. But I think you're right. This is a really crucial window when folks are coming out of jail and they go back to using the amount that they used prior to going in. So it could be something as simple as, when you're with a client saying, hey, just want to put that out there that, if you're going to plan on using, this is just a real crucial time for overdose. And, if you go back to using the same amount, I just want you to have this Narcan because you're at higher risk for overdosing. Just want to put that out there. It could be something really casual like that, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be this big, huge, serious ordeal or conversation, but just to let them know that this is a really crucial time period for them. So thanks for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would add to kind of piggyback off that too, is just to get comfortable having these conversations with our clients. I think when I remember going to like a suicide assessment training, and one of the things they try to train you to do is not be afraid of asking, are you suicidal or do you want to harm yourself? It can be really scary at first. And I think engaging in sometimes conversations about substance use can be feel pretty different for people just starting out. But to get comfortable just asking, you know, being front, making sure they understand your role, making sure they understand you're not going to judge them, and that you're just there to help. And so, yeah, to get comfortable having those conversations. So I think it can be quite a panic at first when you realize your clients might be, if you've never worked in harm reduction before, it can be quite an adjustment. And it's amazing to see some results and how comfortable you can get doing it after it's a short while. So yeah, trust it and consult with your team, because everybody in this agency has done it before. So yeah.
All right, well, that about wraps up this installment of Q&A. So thank you all for your time. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you all soon.